This weekend marks the 53rd anniversary of the passing of Frankie Lymon. Now, those of you who are, maybe under 40 may not be aware of who he is. Those of you who are over 40 and 50 and over, obviously, very well know remember who Frankie Lymon was. Frankie Lymon became a huge star in the mid 1950s during the doo-wop explosion of that era, rock and roll slash doo-wop explosion in the 1950s. His group was called the New Teenagers, or sometimes better known as Frankie Lymon and the New Teenagers. He was the lead soprano singer of that group. Now, the original lineup of that group, which was an integrated group, included three African American members: Lyman himself, Jimmy Merchant, and Sherman Garnes, and two Puerto Rican members, Joe Negroni and Herman Santiago. Their first single, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, was obviously their biggest hit. After Lyman went solo in mid 1957, both his career and of the Teenagers fell into a decline. Lyman fell subject to heroin abuse and ultimately passed away in February 27th, 1968, when he was trying to restart his career um, and was in the motions to restart his career. He was found dead in his grandmother's house in the bathroom of a heroin overdose. And, he was only 25 years old. Um, very sad, but Lyman was born in Harlem, New York on September 30th, 1942, to Jeanette and Howard Lyman. Now, his father was a truck driver, and his mother was a domestic worker for a white family. Both also sang in the gospel group, the Harlem Mayors. Now, Frankie and his brothers Louis and Howie sang with the Harlem Mayor Juniors. A fourth brother, Timmy, was a singer, though not with the Harlem Mayor Juniors. Now, the Lymans struggled financially to make ends meet, so while most kids Lyman's age were playing stickball or hide and go seek or whatever, even as young as age 10, Lyman was working as a grocery boy. At 12, in 1954, Lyman heard a local doo-wop group known as Coupe de Villes, or the Coupe de Villes, at a school talent show. He became friends with the lead singer, Herman Santiago, and he eventually became a member of the group, now calling itself both the Ermines and the Premiers. Dennis Jackson of Columbus, Georgia, was one of the main influences in Lyman's life. His personal donation of $500 helped to start Lyman's career. Now, one day in 1955, a neighbor gave the Premiers several love letters that had been written to him by his girlfriend, hoping to give the boys inspiration to write their own songs. Merchant and Santiago adapted one of the letters into a song called Why Do Fools Fall in Love? The Premiers, now calling themselves the Teenagers, got their first shot at fame after impressing Richard Barrett, a singer with the Valentines. Barrett, in turn, got the group an audition with record producer George Goldner. On the day of the group's audition, original lead singer Santiago was late. Lyman stepped up and told Goldner that he knew the part because he helped write the song. The disc jockeys always called them Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers, which is why I said that oftentimes they're more popularly known as Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers. Now, Goldner signed the group to G Records, and Why Do Fools Fall in Love became its first single in January of 1956. The single peaked at number 6 on the Billboard Top Singles chart and topped the Billboard R&B Singles chart for 5 weeks. 4 other top 10 R&B singles followed over the next year or so. I Want You to Be My Girl, I Promise to Remember, Who Can Explain, The ABCs of Love, and I'm Not a Juvenile Delinquent. I Want You to Be My Girl gave the band its second pop hit, reaching number 13 on the National Billboard Hot 100 chart. Goody Goody, written by Matty Malnick and Johnny Mercer, and originally performed by Benny Goodman, was a number 20 pop hit but did not appear on the R&B chart. The Teenagers placed two other singles in the lower half of the pop chart. With the release of I Want You to Be My Girl, the group's second single, The Teenagers, became Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers. However, the album that mostly compiled the singles released in 1956 came out under the older name, The Teenagers featuring Frankie Lymon. In early 1957, Lymon and the Teenagers broke up while on tour in Europe. During an engagement at the London Palladium, Goldner began pushing Lymon as a solo act, giving him solo spots in the show. Lymon began performing with backing from pre-recorded tapes. The group's last single, Goody Goody, backed with Creation of Love, initially retained the Frankie Lymon and the Teenagers credit, but they were actually solo recordings with backing by session singers. Lymon had officially departed from the group by September of 1957. As a solo artist, Lymon was not nearly as successful as he had been with the Teenagers. Beginning with his second solo release, My Girl, Lymon had moved to Roulette Records. On a July 19, 1957 episode of Alan Freed's live ABC TV show The Big Beat, Lymon began dancing with a white teenage girl while he was performing. Now we gotta remember, this is 1957. All right, it's bad enough that they really didn't want us on television to dance, in their eyes, sexually suggestive with a white girl was too much. So his actions caused a scandal, particularly among Southern TV station owners, and the Big Beat was subsequently canceled. Lyman's slowly declining sales fell sharply in the early 1960s. His highest charting solo hit was a cover of Bobby Day's Little Bitty Pretty One, which peaked at number 58 on the Hot 100 pop chart in 1960, and which had been recorded in 1957. It also has to be noted that unfortunately, I think around maybe 1957, 1958, somewhere around that time, definitely 1958, when he was only 15, 16 years old, Lyman began experimenting with drugs, in particular heroin. Now you got to remember, in the music scene back then, um, there was a lot of drug use, particularly within the set when it comes to rock and rollers, jazz musicians. A lot of people felt like it helped to fuel or expound on their creativity. Later on, LSD and cocaine. But of course, as we all know, there are some people that can do these things casually and not be addicted to it. And then there are many who have an addictive gene and they can't get off of it, and to devastating consequences. And Frankie Lymon, unfortunately, was one of these individuals. Now, having been addicted to heroin since 15, Lyman fell further into his habit, and his performing career went into decline. According to Lyman in an interview with Ebony magazine in 1967, he was first introduced to heroin when he was 15 by a woman twice his age. In 1961, Roulette, now run by Morris Levy, ended their contract with Lyman and he entered a drug rehabilitation program. After losing Lyman, the Teenagers went through a string of replacement singers, the first of whom was Billy Lebrano. In 1960, Howard Kenny Bubo sang lead on Tonight's the Night with the Teenagers. Later that year, Johnny Houston sang lead on two songs. The Teenagers Who Had Been Moved by Morris Levy to End Records was released from his contract in 1961. The Teenagers briefly reunited with Lyman in 1965 without success. Over the next few years, Lyman struggled through short-lived deals with 20th Century Fox Records and Columbia Records. He began a relationship with Elizabeth Mickey Waters, who became his first wife in January 1964 and gave birth to his only child, Francine, who died just 2 days later after birth at Lenox Hill Hospital. Lyman's marriage to Waters was not legal because she was still married to her first husband at the time. After the marriage failed, he moved to Los Angeles in the mid-1960s, where he began a romantic relationship with Zola Taylor. Now, if that name sounds familiar, Zola Taylor was the female member of the Platters. Oh, yeah, I'm the great pretender. Ooh, pretending that I'm doing well. Taylor claimed to have married Lyman in Mexico in 1965, although their relationship, ended several months later, reportedly because of Lyman's drug habits. Lyman, however, had been known to say that their marriage was a publicity stunt and Taylor could provide no legal documentation of their marriage. In fact, in a gossip column in 1966 at the time, Zola Taylor said the whole thing was a joke that she went along with at the time. His final television performance was on Hollywood A Go-Go in 1965, where the then 23-year-old singer lip-synced to the recordings of his 13-year-old self-singing Why Do Fools Fall in Love. On June 21st, 1966, he was arrested on a heroin charge and was drafted into the United States Army in lieu of a jail sentence. He reported to Fort Gordon, Georgia, near Augusta, Georgia, for training. While in the Augusta area, Lyman met and fell in love with Emira Eagle, a school teacher at Hornsby Elementary in Augusta. The two were wed in June of 1967, and Lyman repeatedly went AWOL to secure gigs at small southern clubs. Dishonorably discharged from the Army, Lyman moved into his wife's home and continued to perform sporadically. Traveling to New York in 1968, Lyman was signed by manager Sam Bray to his Big Apple label, and the singer returned to recording. Relay Records expressed interest in releasing Lyman's record in conjunction with Big Apple and scheduled a recording session for February 28, 1968. A major promotion had been arranged with CHO Associates owned by radio personalities Frankie Crocker, Herb Hamlet, and Eddie O.J. Lyman, now staying in his grandmother's home in Harlem where he had grown up, celebrated his good fortune by taking heroin. He had remained clean ever since entering the Army 3 years earlier. On February 27, 1968, Lyman was found dead of a heroin overdose at the age of 25 on the floor of his grandmother's bathroom with a syringe by his side. Lyman the Baptist was buried at Catholic St. Raymond Cemetery in the Throgs Neck section of the Bronx, New York City, New York. Unfortunately, Lyman's troubles did not end with his passing. After Diana Ross returned Why Do Fools Fall in Love to the top 10 in 1981, a major controversy concerning Lyman's estate ensued. Zola Taylor, Elizabeth Waters, and Emira Eagle each approached Morris Levy, the music impresario who retained possession of Lyman's copyrights and his royalties, claiming to be Lyman's rightful widow. Lyman had neglected to divorce any of them. The complex issue resulted in lawsuits and counter lawsuits and in 1986, the first of several court cases concerning the ownership of Lyman's estate began. Trying to determine who was indeed the lawful Mrs. Frankie Lymon was complicated by more issues. Waters was already married when she married Lyman. She had separated from her first husband, but their divorce was finalized in 1965 after she had married Lyman. Taylor claimed to have married Lyman in Mexico in 1965, but could produce no acceptable evidence of their union. Lyman's marriage to Eagle, on the other hand, was properly documented as having taken place at Beulah Grove Baptist Church in Augusta, Georgia, in 1967. However, the singer was still apparently twice married and never divorced when he married Eagle. The first decision was made in Waters' favor. Eagle appealed, and in 1989, the appellate division of the New York State Supreme Court reversed the original decision and awarded Lyman's estate to Eagle. Much of this issue was talked about in a movie. I think the movie was an HBO movie. Why Do Fools Fall in Love? I think it came out in 1998, and trying to remember the movie. Let's see. I remember Lawrence Tate played Frankie Lymon. Let me see who's in that movie. Lawrence Tate played Frankie Lymon, and I think Halle Berry was in that movie as well. Yeah, here we go. So this movie came out in 1998, and it was based upon the legal issues that transpired. Well, much of it is based on the legal issues that transpired after Frankie Lyman's death in 1968 regarding who was entitled to what. And yeah, it starred Halle Berry, Vivica A. Fox, Lela Rochon, Lawrence Tate, and Little Richard playing himself in that movie. And it came out in August of 1998. And actually, it did not debut on HBO. For some reason, I thought it was an HBO movie. Actually, was a movie released uh, in theaters, and didn't do all that well. Only grossed $12 million. But that's pretty much the story of Frankie Lymon, man. He came upon the scene. He burst upon the scene in the height of the doo-wop rock and roll era in the mid 1950s. And unfortunately, his addiction to drugs ruined his career. And I also believe, too, that as he got older, I think he lost his falsetto voice, if I'm not mistaken. I think that the tone and tenor of his voice was damaged by the drugs and because he got older. Remember when he first started, he was a teenager, like a young teenager, I think 13, 14 years old. But it's such a tragedy that he's only 25 years old when he died. And it's sad that he had been clean for 3 years, ever since he went into the army. He had been clean. 1965, he stopped using drugs. But just that, like it's amazing how despair can trigger a relapse. But in this situation, it was it was euphoria. He thought that he was back, and to celebrate, he wanted to reward himself by probably, in his mind, well, I'm just going to give myself one last buzz, one last hit, and I'm not going to do it anymore. But unfortunately, he gambled one times too many with injecting himself with that stuff. And it might have been a bad batch. I don't know what it was, but it took him out of here. He was only 25 years old. Tell me what you guys think.